today we'll be looking at how to write response 3, which is an annotation of one of your research sources for essay 3. I will be doing a demonstration for Landen's source, or one of Landen's sources. Apologies, but I do not have time to write a transcript for this particular video, so I will try to speak more slowly. We'll start in our Google Classroom and we'll click on the classwork tab to scroll down to response 3, which is the annotated source. We click here and make sure that we click on view instructions in order to access the your work section. I am going to create a new Google Doc, which is the format that you'll be turning this in. And I'll get rid of the tab on the side and I will make everything double spaced just to make sure. So I'll type in Landen's name. And then the class name, English 100, the assignment, response 3, and the due date, which is 14 March 2025. This particular assignment does not require a title. Landen can give it a title if he wishes, but I'm going to start with the first of the 4 elements that are required for this particular response. So if you look at the instructions, you'll see that the first thing that's required is the MLA works cited entry, which you may use a citation generator for, but you always have to double check. I'll show everyone how to do the hanging indent for Landen's source because he's not using a database generated source from the library which provides citations. Instead, we will be doing one of the sources that he found through a Google search, which does not come with a citation, which means we have to make one up ourselves. So we'll start by setting the indentation. And there are 2 ways you can do this. The first way is through the Format drop-down menu in Google Docs. If you scroll down to Align and Indent, and then scroll down to Indentation Options, you will access the way to create a hanging indent. So under the special indent, you click there and you select hanging, and then in the box next to it, you type in 0.5 and then click apply. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to show you the other way to create a hanging indent. This involves using the ruler function and the indentation markers. So I'm going to click and drag both markers over to 0.5, half an inch. And then I'm going to click the first line marker back to 0. So now I'll just keep typing and it will automatically indent the entry the way I want it to. So this is Landen's source that I'm going to annotate. He can annotate up to 3 sources if he wishes. I will post this as a Google Doc in Google Classroom as well as in actually I'm going to post it as a PDF. I'll put it in both Lamaku and in Google Classroom. This particular source comes from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, which is part of the government's National Institutes of Health. This doesn't have an author, but it should be reliable anyway because it's partly because it's coming from the government and it's from a national branch or program within that government. Also because it provides references down at the bottom. So this is one of the 2 check marks for every source that you're going to be looking for your research essay to make sure that they have references and that these references can work. It applies as well to any information that you might get from Wikipedia. You cannot use Wikipedia's article, but you can steal their sources, in which case it's probably more accurate than the article. Okay, so we're going to start with not fentanyl drug facts, but this question of what is fentanyl, because there's a larger section, I think, that's called fentanyl drug facts, or we could use both titles in Landen's works cited. So we're going to put it in quotes because it's just one web page on the website in a section. It's a small piece, not the biggest container. So we'll write fentanyl drug facts and put a colon for the second title, which is what is fentanyl? We're going to capitalize the is here because that's one of the capitalization rules. And then we end with the double quote mark. Next, we'll have to italicize the container. In this case, it is the website that is included. We're not going to use the URL or NIH.gov, but we're going to call it National Institute on Drug Abuse, NIDA. This goes in italics, which we can use by clicking on the slanty I or hitting Control I, or for those Mac users, it'll be Command I. So we'll call it the National Institute on Drug Abuse and get rid of the italics again. Then we look for, let's see, the date that this was posted. And often you will find there is no posted date. There might be an update date. So we'll double check for that. And it looks like the date we can see is June 2021. We're not looking for the copyright date down here because that really doesn't apply. We want a specific date for our source. If we don't find a date, we can write n.p dot and then move on. So we're going to write June 2021, and then we will select the URL here, copy it, and then insert. We can either click on the link button here, or we can right click and insert the link and make sure we paste in the URL and not the name, the title, because Google will try to put in a title instead of the actual URL. So we prefer the URL to be there. Now we want to make sure that Landen starts his paragraphs, but we don't want the hanging indent for this. So I'm going to move the markers back to point 0. And we will indent or tab for the first paragraph, which is the summary paragraph. So in this case, we don't have authors, we don't have to. So we're just going to put in the title of the source and the thesis. In the case of this particular source, we would say the thesis is to cover or discuss the definition of fentanyl and explain the impacts it has on the users as well as other people, the physical as well as the, let's say, psychological or social impacts, because it talks about treatments and addiction, and then how you treat addiction, and then they have points to remember. So it may not actually address like how the drug impacts society, but it does impact, like shows in brief how the drug is, let's say, caused or what it is and what it does, basically. Okay? So we can start by saying the article fentanyl drug facts. What is fentanyl? Focuses on um, defining what kind of drug fentanyl is and how it impacts the user, including, also, we'll just focus on that for now, period. Okay. The article discusses briefly um, the physiological, let's say, effects of fentanyl on the user um, the probabilities of addiction and suggestions for addiction treatment. And then we end with a takeaway, and let's see if there is a takeaway message. And it says behavioral apart. So it doesn't really have a reference, but it does have points to remember about um, how powerful fentanyl can be. So we can say that about the article ends with a summary of key points, including a warning about how powerful this particular drug can be. Okay, so in the case of Landen, this summary is going to be very short. For people who are using scholarly articles, like let's say something from a database, such as opposing viewpoints. Um, so if we look at this one, let's say innovation and adaptation, the rise of a fentanyl smoking culture in San Francisco. This is not really appropriate for Landon's so topic because he wants to focus on fentanyl use in Hawaii specifically. But you can see that this particular article is almost 10,500 words. This is really long. So in the key, if somebody is using a scholarly article that is over 5,000 words in length, then their summary will be much longer because they have to look at the introduction, they have to skim through the analysis and the data, and then they're going to be focusing mostly on, let's say, the discussion at the end, okay, about what this what this research revealed, and then also like their summary. Okay, so in their case, then it will be a much longer summary, paragraph for response three, around, let's say, over 150 words, maybe up to 250 words. In this case, Landon's is only about, let's say, 63 words, which is okay. He can add more if he wants, but he doesn't have to. Okay, his second paragraph is his evaluation paragraph. This is where he decides whether this source is reliable or not, if he agrees or disagrees. In this case, because he's dealing with a government article, he may not need to disagree or agree. So he can say, this source is reliable because it comes from um, the NIDA department of the government, and it provides um, its, let's say, references at the end of the article, which shows that the information is backed up by research. Okay, so we're going to say, for example, uh, the article states that, and here Landon can actually quote from the article, and he can say maybe fentanyl is addictive because of its potency. Um, so he can actually copy whatever this says and paste it in with the shift key. He doesn't need to cite the title because we understand that it's all from one source. Okay. We cannot use other sources in this discussion. We are only focusing on this particular source. Um, So he says the article states that fentanyl is addictive because of its potency. A person taking prescription fentanyl, as instructed by a doctor, can experience dependence, which is characterized by withdrawal symptoms. So he can say this evidence shows that fentanyl is a dangerous drug, not just for uh, drug addicts, but for anyone who is prescribed the medication for pain relief by a doctor. Um, and if he wants, he can actually look for this particular source, like where are they getting this information from? And it's probably here, like fentanyl pharmacology, toxicology, or like related compounds, structure analogs, let's say. And he can say like the American Academy of Treatment, so milk. So it's also important to note that fentanyl transfers to mothers who are nursing their babies. Okay? Um, the article also references studies that um, show how the drug can be um, transferred is not it can get into the milk of nursing babies or infants. Then he'll end with um, so he can say basically he agrees with this article. Yeah, I agree with this source's information since it shows um, evidence of how this drug works. A last paragraph for Landon will be how he uses it. How is he going to use this particular source in his essay? So he might say, I will use this source when I am discussing um, the general makeup of fentanyl to show how it is legal or legally available and widely used, but also extremely dangerous because it is so powerful. Okay, then this is also where he can address any limitations or possible drawbacks to this particular source. We could say like the only maybe drawback to this source is that it's very general. Because it's only giving background information, it's not going to be giving you very specific evidence or data, let's say. So he can write that. He can say, although this source has um, useful information, it is a general um, overview, let's say, of fentanyl, and it does not have specific evidence or data in its discussion, but um, that lack can be addressed by other sources that do focus on specific data. Overall, I believe that this source will be useful. Period. Lastly, we will have Landon's works cited word count. So we will select the three paragraphs, but not the works cited entry. And we have 278, which is pretty close to the recommended length of 300. So if Landon wants, he can be a little more specific in the summary. He can talk about the article discusses specific physical reactions or consequences of fentanyl and how to identify the signs of addiction, as well as particular recommended treatment methods. Okay, so he can add a little bit more here if he wants to get past the 300 mark for the three paragraphs. And if he goes on to a new page, or actually even with one page, he will need a page number. So we're going to choose that from the insert menu and scroll down to page numbers. We'll choose the page numbers in the upper right-hand corner and we'll put in Landon's, I think I have Landon's last name correct. I might be wrong. I'll have to go check. I think it's Alisa Khan. Okay, I'll have to change this. So it's actually the only thing in the header. So I will correct it to Balisa Khan. Oh no. Okay, here we go. So now we have Landon's sample response 3.